Ambassador Cathara adjusted her breathing apparatus as she watched the human delegation approach through the crystal viewing chamber. The Zelani had prepared for this moment for cycles, ever since their long-range sensors detected the strange metal ships emerging from the void between stars. Ships that moved with purpose and intelligence, carrying beings from a world the Zelani databases had never recorded. The humans were smaller than expected. Cathara had studied the preliminary scans, but seeing them in person was different. They walked upright on only 2 limbs, their bodies covered in artificial materials rather than natural armor or fur. Their faces were exposed, showing patches of hair and skin that looked impossibly vulnerable. Most disturbing were their eyes, forward-facing like predators, but small and lacking the impressive size that marked true hunters. "They seem so fragile," whispered her aide, Yelmoth, through their private communication link. "Are we certain they built those vessels?" Cathara shared the doubt. The ships in orbit were impressive, sleek, efficient, armed with weapons that could level cities. Yet these creatures looked like they would break if touched too firmly. Perhaps they were a servant species, controlled by the true masters who remained hidden aboard their vessels. The human leader stepped forward as the atmospheric barriers dissolved. It removed a clear helmet, revealing more of that strange, exposed skin. When it spoke, the translator rendered its words in perfect Zelani. "Greetings. I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Alliance vessel Endeavor. We come in peace, seeking dialogue between our peoples." Cathara felt a flutter of confusion. The human's voice was high-pitched, almost musical, nothing like the deep, resonant tones that commanded respect among civilized species. She forced herself to respond according to protocol. "Welcome, beings of Earth. I am Ambassador Cathara of the Zelani Collective. We are honored by your arrival in our system." She paused, studying the human's face for reactions. "We must admit curiosity about your nature. Our scans suggest your species evolved as prey animals, yet you command technology beyond most civilizations we have encountered." The human called Chen made an expression Cathara couldn't interpret, some kind of facial contortion that seemed pleasant rather than threatening. "I suppose we might seem unusual to you. We'd be happy to share information about our species and learn about yours. Perhaps we could begin with a cultural exchange?" Yelmoth stepped forward eagerly. "Yes, we would be delighted to show you our companions. Every civilized species maintains bonds with their world's apex predators. It demonstrates wisdom and strength." Cathara watched Chen's expression shift to something that might have been interest. "Companions?" "Our Vrex," Yelmoth explained proudly. "Surely your people have similar relationships with your world's dominant hunters." "We have pets," Chen said slowly. "Domesticated animals we keep for companionship." The translation seemed uncertain about several of those concepts, but Cathara felt excitement building. Finally, common ground. "Excellent. Our Vrex are indeed companions. Come, we will show you." They led the human delegation through corridors lined with murals depicting Zelani history. Chen and her people stopped frequently to examine the artwork, asking questions about wars, expansions, and technological developments. Cathara found their curiosity encouraging, clearly an intelligent species, despite their physical limitations. The Vrex chambers were located deep within the station, where the massive creatures could be properly contained and cared for. As they approached, Cathara could hear the familiar sounds, deep rumbles, the scraping of claws against metal, and the occasional roar that could shatter unprotected hearing organs. "They know we're coming," Yelmoth said with obvious affection. "They always recognize my scent from corridors away." Chen asked, "How large are they?" "Adult Vrex typically measure 15 meters in length, not counting their tail spikes. They're remarkably intelligent. We've been breeding them for loyalty and companionship for over 3,000 cycles." They entered the main viewing chamber, where a massive transparent wall separated them from the Vrex habitat. Beyond the barrier, three enormous creatures moved through a landscape of artificial rocks and pools. Each Vrex was roughly the size of the human ships they'd seen, covered in armored scales that gleamed like polished metal. Their 6 limbs ended in claws capable of tearing through starship hulls, and their heads bore rows of teeth longer than the humans were tall. "Magnificent, aren't they?" Cathara said proudly. She turned to gauge the humans' reactions and was puzzled by what she saw. Chen and her people stood absolutely still, their faces showing no expression at all. Several had their hands near what appeared to be equipment on their belts. Strange behavior for beings viewing such magnificence. "They're certainly impressive," Chen said after a long moment. "And you said they're companions." "Watch this," Yelmoth said excitedly. She activated a communication panel and spoke in the ancient tones used to address the Vrex. "Mighty Thexran, we have visitors who wish to see your glory." The largest Vrex turned toward them, its massive head tilting as it recognized Yelmoth's voice. Then, to Cathara's delight, it performed one of the traditional greeting displays. The creature lowered its head, retracted its claws, and made soft rumbling sounds that indicated pleasure and affection. "You see?" Cathara said triumphantly. "Thexaran shows respect and friendship. This is why we are a civilized people. We have earned the loyalty of our world's greatest predators. They could easily destroy us, yet they choose to show affection instead." Chen watched as the Vrex performed another display, rolling partially onto its back to expose the softer scales of its belly, a gesture of ultimate trust among Vrex. "How did your people accomplish this domestication?" Chen asked. "Centuries of careful breeding and training," Yelmoth explained. "We select for intelligence, loyalty, and the ability to form emotional bonds with Zelani handlers. It began as a necessity. Early Zelani settlements were constantly attacked by wild Vrex packs. Our ancestors realized that rather than simply fighting them, we could earn their respect through strength and wisdom." Strength? Combat trials. Young Zelani must prove their worth by facing juvenile Vrex in ritual combat. Those who earn the respect of a Vrex are considered adults in our society. The Vrex, in turn, imprint on their combat partners and form lifelong bonds. Chen's expression had changed again. Cathara was beginning to recognize it as what humans might call concern. "Your people fight these creatures hand to hand?" "With ceremonial weapons only," Cathara said. "It's about proving courage and wisdom, not causing harm. A true warrior knows when to strike and when to show mercy. The Vrex respect this balance." One of Chen's companions, a larger human with darker skin, spoke quietly to their leader. Chen nodded and turned back to the Zelani. "This is fascinating. We'd love to learn more about your traditions. Perhaps we could arrange a demonstration." Cathara felt a surge of pride. Finally, a species that appreciated the sophistication of Zelani culture. "Of course! Yelmoth here is one of our finest Vrex handlers. She could show you the bonding ritual." As they made arrangements, Chen asked, "We're curious. What do you know of Earth's predators? Have your long-range scans detected anything about our world's ecosystem?" Cathara accessed her datapad. "Our preliminary surveys suggest Earth hosts several large carnivorous species. Nothing approaching Vrex size, but respectable specimens nonetheless. We detected thermal signatures of creatures you call tigers, bears, and sharks. Presumably, your people have formed similar bonds with these predators?" The silence that followed was longer than before. Finally, Chen spoke carefully. "Our relationships with predators are different from yours." "How so?" "We haven't domesticated any apex predators in the way you describe. In fact, humans are generally considered Earth's apex predator." Cathara felt confusion mixed with amusement. Your species? But you're clearly evolved from prey stock. Small size, forward-facing eyes, suited for hiding rather than hunting, minimal natural weapons. How could you be apex predators? Chen's facial expression shifted to something Cathara was beginning to recognize as what humans might call a smile. But there was something about it that made her instinctively step backward. "It's true we're not physically impressive," Chen said. "We don't have claws or fangs or armored scales, but we have other advantages." "Such as?" "We're persistent, very persistent, and we're quite good at making tools." Before Cathara could ask what this meant, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in harsh red illumination, and automated voices announced a containment breach in the Vrex chambers. Through the viewing wall, they could see that something had changed in the habitat. The three Vrex were no longer performing greeting displays. Instead, they huddled together in the far corner of their enclosure, making distress calls that Cathara had never heard before. Their eyes were fixed on something beyond the viewing wall, something behind the human delegation. Cathara turned to see what had frightened creatures that feared nothing. What she found was impossible to process. The humans had changed. They no longer stood casually with hands at their sides. Instead, they had spread out in what was clearly a tactical formation, their bodies coiled with tension that spoke of predators ready to strike. But it was their eyes that truly terrified her. Those small, forward-facing eyes were no longer soft and curious. They held a cold, calculating intelligence that seemed to weigh everything in sight for potential threats and advantages. For the first time, Cathara understood why evolution had given predators forward-facing eyes, not for hiding, but for tracking prey with lethal precision. Captain Chen's voice remained calm and pleasant, but somehow that made it more frightening. "Ambassador, I think we should discuss what you mean by civilized species keeping monsters as companions. Because from where we stand, it looks like you're the monsters, and your companions are afraid of you." The largest Vrex, mighty Thexran, let out a mournful cry and pressed itself further into the corner, its massive form trembling like a frightened animal seeking protection from something far more dangerous than itself. Cathara finally understood what the human meant about persistence and tools. She was looking at a tool, a perfectly evolved biological machine designed not for raw power, but for thinking, planning, and killing with surgical precision. No wonder the Vrex were afraid. They could sense what she was only now beginning to comprehend. Earth's monsters didn't show affection to their predators. Earth's monsters were the predators, and everything else was just food waiting to be harvested. The emergency klaxons continued to wail as Cathara struggled to process what she was witnessing. The humans hadn't moved from their positions, yet somehow the entire atmosphere in the chamber had shifted. It was as if the air itself had become charged with danger. "There seems to be some confusion," Captain Chen said, her voice maintaining that terrifying calm. "Perhaps we should clarify a few things about human civilization." Yelmoth, who had been frozen in place since the Vrex began their distress calls, finally found her voice. "I don't understand. What did you do to them? Thexran has never shown fear. Never." "We didn't do anything," Chen replied. "They can simply recognize what we are." The human beside Chen, the one Cathara now realized had been assessing tactical positions from the moment they entered, spoke for the first time. His voice was deeper, rougher, like grinding stone. "Ma'am, should I explain the concept of an apex predator to them?" Chen considered this for a moment. "I think that would be helpful, Sergeant Martinez. Ambassador Cathara seems to be operating under some misunderstandings about the nature of predation." Martinez stepped forward, and Cathara noticed that his movements were different from Chen's. Where the captain moved with controlled precision, Martinez moved like something that killed for a living. Every step was perfectly balanced, ready to shift in any direction at a moment's notice. "See, here's the thing," Martinez began, addressing Cathara directly. "You folks seem to think being physically impressive makes you dangerous. Big teeth, claws, armor, that sort of thing. But you're looking at it backwards." "I don't understand," Cathara managed. "Your Vrex there, they're impressive, sure. 15 meters long, armored scales, claws that could tear through starship hulls. But they're also predictable. Big predators like that, they rely on fear and intimidation. They charge in, use their size and natural weapons, hope their prey either runs or freezes up." Martinez gestured toward the cowering Vrex. "That's why they're afraid. They can sense we're not going to do either of those things." Yelmoth's voice cracked with confusion. "But you're so small. You have no natural weapons. How could you possibly threaten a Vrex?" Chen's smile returned, and this time Cathara could see exactly what it was, the expression of a predator that enjoyed playing with its food. "Sergeant, why don't you tell them about the time you hunted grizzly bears?" "Which time, ma'am? With the bow, the spear, or just my hands?" Cathara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "You hunt your world's apex predators for sport?" "Sport, food, protection, territory disputes," Martinez listed casually. "Humans hunt everything, Ambassador. Bears, tigers, sharks, whales that are 50 times our size. We hunted creatures so efficiently that we had to make rules to stop ourselves from hunting them extinct." "But how?" Yelmoth whispered. Martinez's grin was nothing like Chen's controlled smile. It was pure, predatory satisfaction. "Same way we do everything else. We think, we plan, and we use tools." He gestured to one of his companions, who stepped forward carrying what looked like a simple metal tube. "This is a rifle. Fires a small projectile at 3 times the speed of sound. One shot would punch through your Vrex's armor and destroy whatever vital organs I aimed at. Range of about 800 meters. Cathara stared at the device. "But that's not honorable combat. Where's the skill in killing from such distance?" "The skill," Chen interjected, "is in making the shot. But you're missing the point. Martinez, tell them about persistence hunting." "Right. See, before we had rifles, humans killed large predators using our real advantage. We don't give up, ever." Martinez's voice took on an almost academic tone, as if he were discussing the weather. "A bear is faster than a human in a sprint. Stronger, better natural weapons, home territory advantage, but bears get tired after a few kilometers. Humans don't. We would track a bear for days," Chen added, "following its trail, staying just far enough away to avoid confrontation, never letting it rest, never letting it eat, never letting it sleep. Eventually it would collapse from exhaustion." "And then?" Cathara asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Then we'd move in with spears and finish the job," Martinez said matter-of-factly. "Of course, that was before we invented better tools. These days, if a human really wants to kill something, we have options that would make your Vrex look like pets." Yelmoth had gone pale, her skin shifting to the gray coloration that indicated extreme stress in Zilani physiology. "You're saying your entire species are assassins?" "Worse," Chen said. "We're omnivores. We kill everything, eat what we want, and domesticate the rest." She turned toward the Vrex habitat, and her voice carried clearly through the transparent barrier. "You mentioned that your people prove themselves through combat with juvenile Vrex. One-on-one with ceremonial weapons to earn respect and form bonds." "Yes," Cathara said weakly. "Human children play games more dangerous than that." Martinez laughed, a sound that made the Vrex press even further into their corner. "Hell, ma'am, remember basic training? They had us doing live fire exercises at age 16. "Or summer camp," added another human. Survival training with nothing but a knife and a water bottle, week-long treks through wilderness full of actual predators. Chen nodded. Human children, Ambassador. Not warriors earning their place in society, children learning basic skills they'll need as adults. Kethara's worldview was crumbling piece by piece. But your people seem so peaceful. You speak of dialogue, of coming in peace. Oh, we are peaceful, Chen assured her. Remarkably peaceful considering what we're capable of. We learned to be peaceful because the alternative was destroying ourselves. I don't understand. Humans spent most of their history killing each other, Martinez explained. Got very good at it. Invented better and better ways to kill more efficiently. Eventually, we created weapons that could sterilize entire planets. And we almost used them, Chen added quietly. We came very close to rendering Earth uninhabitable because we couldn't stop fighting each other. That's when we learned the most important lesson in human history. Which was? Chen's expression became something that might have been sad, if not for the predatory intelligence that never left her eyes. That peace isn't the absence of violence. Peace is violence held in check by mutual understanding of consequences. Alarms suddenly stopped, replaced by an announcement in the Zilani language. Kethara listened with growing horror as the station's automated systems reported what they had detected in the human ships. No, she whispered. That can't be accurate. Chen tilted her head. What did it say? The sensors. They've completed their analysis of your vessels. They're reporting weapon signatures that... Kethara couldn't finish the sentence. That could crack planets, Martinez suggested helpfully. Multiple planet-killing weapons per ship, Yelmoth read from her datapad, her voice barely audible. Enough firepower to sterilize every world in our system simultaneously. Chen nodded as if this were perfectly reasonable. Standard defensive armament for exploration vessels. We learned long ago that the best way to ensure peaceful contact with new species is to make the alternative too expensive to consider. Defensive? Kethara's voice cracked. Oh yes, our actual warships are much more heavily armed, but we didn't think we'd need those for a first contact scenario. Chen's smile returned. After all, we came in peace. Martinez checked a device on his wrist. Ma'am, the captain's asking if we need backup. Something about elevated stress readings from the station. Tell him we're just having a cultural exchange, Chen replied. Though you might mention that our hosts seem to be experiencing some cognitive dissonance about human nature. She turned back to Kethara, who was now struggling to remain standing as the full implications crashed over her. You see, Ambassador, your people made a fundamental error in understanding what makes a species civilized. You assumed that forming bonds with dangerous creatures was a sign of wisdom and strength. It is, Kethara protested weakly. The ability to earn respect from apex predators. Shows that your people are sophisticated prey animals, Chen finished. You've learned to negotiate with things that could kill you, which is admirable. But humans took a different evolutionary path. Which path? Martinez answered with obvious pride in his species. We became the things that other apex predators have nightmares about. Through the viewing wall, Thexran let out another mournful cry. The massive creature, which had never shown fear of anything in its 3-decade lifespan, was trying to burrow into the corner of its habitat like a frightened animal seeking shelter from a cosmic horror. Chen observed the Vrex with clinical interest. Your companions understand something that you're still processing, Ambassador. They can sense what we are on a level deeper than conscious thought. Every predatory instinct they possess is screaming that they're in the presence of something far more dangerous than themselves. But you said you came in peace, Yelmoth whispered. We did. And we do. Human civilization has learned to appreciate peace because we understand the alternative better than any species in the galaxy. Chen's voice became gentle, almost motherly. We don't want to hurt you or your people. We genuinely hope to establish friendly relations between our species." She paused, letting that sink in before delivering the final blow. "But never mistake our preference for peace as an indication of weakness. We are very, very good at violence, Ambassador. We've had millions of years to perfect it, and the reason we can afford to be peaceful is because everything else in the universe understands, on some primal level, exactly what would happen if they forced us to stop being peaceful." The station's communication system crackled to life with an urgent message from the Zelani High Command. Through the speakers, Cathara could hear panic in the voice of the Supreme Chancellor himself. "Ambassador Cathara, respond immediately. Our deep space monitors have detected additional human vessels approaching the system. Estimated arrival time is 6 hours. We count over 300 ships." Chen's communicator chirped, and she activated it with casual efficiency. "Captain Chen here. Captain, this is Admiral Harrison aboard the Prometheus. We received your initial contact report and wanted to provide support for first contact protocols. How are negotiations proceeding?" Chen glanced at Cathara's terrified expression and Martinez's amused grin. "Quite well, Admiral. The Zelani are adjusting their understanding of human civilization. I think we're making real progress." "Excellent. We'll maintain standard approach protocols unless you need immediate assistance." "Understood, sir. Chen out." She turned back to the Zelani delegation, where Cathara was staring at her communicator in mounting horror. 300 ships, Cathara repeated numbly. "First contact fleet," Chen explained. "Standard procedure when one of our exploration vessels encounters a new spacefaring civilization. Can't be too careful when introducing ourselves to neighbors." "Neighbors? Well, you're only 4 light years from our nearest colony. Practically next door, galactically speaking." Chen's tone remained conversational, as if they were discussing local weather patterns. "We thought it would be polite to come introduce ourselves properly." Yelmoth looked between the terrified Vrex and the casually lethal humans. "What do you want from us?" Chen's expression became genuinely surprised. "Want? Nothing. We're just saying hello. Though I suppose we should discuss establishing formal diplomatic relations, trade agreements, cultural exchanges, the usual neighborly interactions. And if we refuse?" The silence that followed wasn't threatening. It was something far worse. It was the silence of predators who had never seriously considered the possibility that prey might refuse their terms. Finally, Martinez spoke, his voice filled with genuine confusion. "Why would you refuse? We're offering friendship, trade, technological exchange. What's not to like?" Cathara realized that the humans weren't being deliberately intimidating. This was simply who they were, being so fundamentally dangerous that they couldn't understand why anyone would refuse their offer of peaceful coexistence, because the alternative was too terrible to contemplate. 3 hours later, Cathara sat in her private chambers, staring at reports that painted an increasingly terrifying picture of humanity. Her research teams had been working frantically to understand what they were dealing with, and every new piece of information made the situation worse. The preliminary biological analyses were particularly disturbing. Humans possessed the most efficient calorie-burning metabolisms yet recorded. They could maintain peak physical performance for hours without rest. Their bone density was absurd, their muscle fiber efficiency was off the charts, and their reflexes were fast enough to dodge projectile weapons at close range. But it was their psychological profiles that truly horrified her. The humans showed stress responses consistent with apex predators, but their social structures were unlike anything in the galactic databases. They formed massive cooperative groups while maintaining individual territorial instincts. They could switch between nurturing behavior and lethal violence in microseconds. Most disturbing of all, they showed clear signs of enjoying conflict resolution through dominance displays. A soft chime announced an incoming message from Yelmoth. Cathara accepted the communication and her aide's image appeared in the holographic display. "Ambassador, I've completed the cultural analysis you requested on human entertainment media," Yelmoth reported, though her voice sounded strained. "The results are troubling. Go ahead." They voluntarily watch other humans engage in ritualized combat for entertainment. They call it sports. The most popular variants involve either physical contact designed to incapacitate opponents or scenarios where teams attempt to invade each other's territory. Cathara rubbed her temples where a headache was building. "Combat sports are not uncommon among aggressive species. Ambassador, they also watch fictional depictions of themselves killing aliens." The room seemed to grow colder. "Excuse me?" "They create elaborate entertainment scenarios where humans fight and defeat various alien species. The aliens are always portrayed as either incompetent or evil, and the humans always win through superior tactics, technology, or individual prowess." Cathara felt something approaching despair. "They fantasize about killing us." "It gets worse. They have thousands of these fictional scenarios, covering virtually every possible alien contact situation. And in every single one, humans are portrayed as the ultimate survivors, the species that never gives up, never surrenders, and always finds a way to win." Before Cathara could respond, her door chimed with an incoming visitor. The security display showed Captain Chen standing patiently outside, still wearing that predatory smile. "Ambassador," Chen's voice came through the intercom, "I was wondering if we could continue our conversation. I think there are still some misunderstandings to clear up." Cathara looked at Yelmoth's image, saw her own fear reflected in her aide's expression, and made the only decision that seemed reasonable. She opened the door. Chen entered alone, moving with that same controlled precision. She glanced at the holographic display where Yelmoth's image still flickered, and nodded politely. "I hope I'm not interrupting important work," Chen said. "We were researching human culture," Cathara admitted. "Ah, find anything interesting?" Yelmoth's voice came through the communicator, tight with barely controlled terror. "Your species creates entertainment based on killing aliens." Chen's expression shifted to what Cathara was learning to recognize as genuine confusion. "Well, yes. Although we also create entertainment about aliens killing us, aliens helping us, aliens falling in love with us, and aliens teaching us valuable life lessons. We tend to explore all possibilities in our fiction. But the ones where you win are more popular," Cathara observed. "True." Chen settled into a chair without being invited. Another casual display of dominance that seemed unconscious. "Humans like stories where humans overcome challenges. It's a cultural thing. Why do you imagine fighting us at all?" Chen was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made Cathara's skin crawl. "Because we imagine fighting everything, Ambassador. It's how we survive." "I don't understand." "Every human child grows up learning to assess threats, plan responses, and think tactically. We play games where we simulate combat, solve puzzles that require strategic thinking, and compete in scenarios designed to test our ability to overcome obstacles." Chen leaned forward slightly, and Cathara fought the urge to back away. "By the time we reach adulthood, we've spent years mentally preparing for every possible conflict scenario." Yelmoth's voice was barely a whisper. "You're all soldiers." "No," Chen corrected. "Soldiers are humans specifically trained for organized warfare. Every human is something much more dangerous. We're all survivors. We prepare for threats that don't exist, plan for disasters that may never happen, and practice skills we hope we'll never need to use." "Why?" Chen's smile returned, and this time Cathara could see the sadness behind it. "Because our ancestors who didn't do those things died. For millions of years, the humans who survived were the ones who could outthink, outplan, and outfight everything else on Earth. Eventually, We ran out of external threats. So you fought each other? Constantly. We got very good at it. Too good. Chen's voice became distant. We nearly wiped ourselves out several times before we learned to channel those instincts into productive activities. Cathara thought about the 300 ships approaching the system, each carrying enough firepower to sterilize planets. And now? Now we explore the galaxy, meet new species, and try very hard not to be the monsters our ancestors created us to be. Chen's expression became serious. That's why we value peace so highly, Ambassador. We know what we're capable of when we're not peaceful. A new voice joined the conversation as Admiral Harrison's image appeared in the holographic display alongside Yelmoth. The human leader looked older than Chen, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. Captain Chen, I apologize for the interruption, but we've received some concerning communications from the Zilani leadership. Chen straightened in her chair. What kind of communications, sir? They're asking about human intentions regarding territorial expansion, resource acquisition, and population control. Harrison's expression was grave. They seem to be under the impression that we're evaluating them for conquest. Cathara felt heat rise in her face. We simply want to understand what we're dealing with. Harrison studied her through the holographic display, and Cathara realized she was being evaluated by something that made Chen look like a diplomat. The Admiral's eyes held the kind of cold intelligence that came from making life-and-death decisions on a galactic scale. Ambassador, Harrison said finally, what exactly do you think we want from you? We don't know, Cathara admitted. Your technology is clearly superior to ours. Your weapons could destroy our civilization. Your people are natural predators who seem to enjoy planning conflicts. What are we supposed to think? Harrison was quiet for a moment, then spoke with the kind of authority that made stars seem insignificant. You're supposed to think that humanity learned a very important lesson about power, Ambassador. We learned that the ability to destroy something doesn't mean you should destroy it. Why not? Because destruction is easy. Any fool with enough firepower can blow up a planet. But creation? Building something beautiful, fostering growth, protecting life, that requires wisdom? Harrison's voice became gentle, almost fatherly. We spent millennia proving we could kill anything. Now we spend our time proving we can create instead. Chen nodded. That's why we explore, Ambassador. Not to conquer, but to learn. Every new species we meet teaches us something about the universe, about life, about possibilities we never imagined. And if a species refuses to cooperate? The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't threatening. It was sad. Then we leave them alone, Harrison said simply. We monitor their space to ensure they don't threaten other species, but we don't force contact. The galaxy is vast enough for everyone. Yelmoth's voice cracked with confusion. You would just leave? Of course, Chen said. What would be the point of forcing unwelcome contact? We're not conquerors, we're explorers. If you don't want to talk to us, that's your choice. Cathara felt something fundamental shift in her understanding. But you could force us. Easily, Harrison confirmed. But force builds resentment. Resentment builds rebellion, and rebellion leads to conflict. We prefer to avoid that cycle entirely. How? Chen's smile became genuine for the first time since they'd met. By being the kind of neighbors you want to have, rather than the kind you're afraid of. A new alarm began sounding throughout the station. Not the emergency klaxons from before, but the gentle chimes that indicated an important announcement. Cathara listened as the station's communication system relayed a message from the Zilani High Council. All citizens, this is Chancellor Vexitar, with an important announcement regarding our new neighbors. After extensive consultation with our xenopsychology specialists, the Council has voted to accept the human proposal for formal diplomatic relations. Cathara stared at Chen in shock. Proposal? What proposal? Chen looked genuinely confused. The one I sent 3 hours ago. Standard diplomatic protocol, formal recognition, embassy exchange, trade negotiation framework, cultural exchange programs. I thought you were analyzing it. We were analyzing your species' threat potential. Harrison's laughter came through the communicator, warm and genuinely amused. Ambassador, let me give you some advice about dealing with humans. We don't make threats. If we intended to harm you, you'd already be dead and we'd be discussing terraforming schedules with our colonization specialists. Instead, Chen added, we're discussing whether you'd prefer your embassy on one of your orbital stations or on the surface of your homeworld. Cathara felt dizzy as the implications washed over her. You really do want to be friends? It's much more efficient than being enemies, Chen said practically. Friends share resources, trade technologies, help each other solve problems. Enemies just blow each other up until there's nobody left to trade with. Through the viewing port in her chamber, Cathara could see the human fleet maintaining a respectful distance from Zelani space. 300 ships that could have taken the system in minutes, holding position and patiently waiting for permission to approach. You're monsters, she said suddenly. Chen tilted her head. I'm sorry? When we first met, I said that civilized species maintain relationships with their monsters. You said ours showed affection, while yours ate theirs alive. Did I say that? Chen considered this. I suppose I was making a point about the difference between domestication and dominance. What's the difference? Harrison's voice carried a weight of ancient wisdom. Domestication is teaching a wild animal to live safely among civilization. Dominance is teaching civilization to live safely among wild animals. Yelmoth's image flickered as she spoke. You domesticated yourselves. Eventually, Chen confirmed. It took a while. We're naturally competitive, territorial, and aggressive, but we learned to channel those instincts into productive activities like exploration, scientific advancement, and competitive sports. And when they're not productive, Chen's expression became absolutely serious. Then we remind the universe why our ancestors were the apex predators on a planet full of things that could kill us. The communication system chimed again with another message from the High Council. This time, it was an invitation for the human delegation to attend a formal reception celebrating the establishment of diplomatic relations. Chen stood to leave, moving with that same predatory grace. Ambassador, I hope today's conversations have been enlightening. They have, Cathara admitted. Though I'm not sure I'll ever truly understand your species. That's probably wise, Chen said with a smile that was both friendly and terrifying. Understanding humans completely tends to be bad for one's peace of mind. As Chen reached the door, she paused and turned back. Oh, and Ambassador? You might want to suggest that your people avoid challenging humans to competitive activities. We have a tendency to get enthusiastic about winning. After Chen left, Cathara sat in silence for several minutes, processing everything she'd learned. Finally, she activated her communicator and called Yelmoth. What are your thoughts? She asked her aide. Yelmoth's response came after a long pause. I think we've just met the galaxy's most dangerous species, and I think we're very, very lucky that they prefer being friendly. Through her viewing port, Cathara could see the Vrex habitat where Thexaran and his companions had finally stopped cowering. The massive creatures were still clearly agitated, but they had emerged from their corner to resume normal activities. Even the Vrex understood what Cathara was still struggling to accept, that sometimes the greatest predators were the ones who chose not to hunt. The humans had shown them what true monsters looked like. And then they had chosen to be friends instead. It was, Cathara reflected, perhaps the most terrifying kindness anyone had ever shown her species, because now they would always know exactly how much mercy they owed to their new neighbor's self-restraint. The monsters from Earth didn't need to show affection to prove their civilization. They just needed to choose not to be monsters, and that choice, made freely by beings who could have chosen otherwise, was the most human thing of all.